Welcome back to America Trends. I'm Dr. Gina. If you are watching on your computer, make sure you can get us on your local cable carrier. Go to youtubeamerica.com. Enter your zip code to find out where you can find us locally. And if we aren't there, then let your cable company know that they need the premier social television network in America. The Supreme Court SCOTUS has been busy handing down their rulings, and the rulings on lethal injection, gerrymandering, and the EPA all trending today. An attorney, law professor, and expert on these issues, Abbas Kazerounian, is here with us to break them down for us. Abbas, welcome back. It's so good to have you on the show again. Big decision today on lethal injections handed down by the Supreme Court. What were they looking at in this case?
On the lethal injection, what they were looking at is whether under the 8th Amendment for cruel and unusual punishment, whether the cocktail that is given is causes a lot of pain to the inmates that are being put to death.
Right.
And the cocktail consists of 3 injections. And the first one is the one that's in controversy, because the first one is the one that's actually meant to take the pain away by making you unconscious. And then you're paralyzed by the 2nd injection, and then your heart is stopped by the 3rd injection.
Okay.
So the first one is the one that's in contention. And it was a very close decision. It was 5-4, and the dissent called it the chemical equivalent of being burnt at the stake. And because there was a botched execution in Oklahoma in 2014, Clayton Lockett. But the majority said, you know what, you haven't shown us an alternative that is available on the market that's going to cause no pain. And the second element was, you did not show us, the Supreme Court, that this actually creates a substantial amount of pain in the recipient. So that is what really the case was about. Because
they monitor heart rate and pulse and all that stuff, and pain reactors, and okay. All right, so do you think this was decided correctly?
You know, it's hard to tell, because I don't think there was enough data to really understand what the recipient of these injections are getting. But what I can tell you is that the current drug, that's the first dose out of the 3 in the cocktail, that particular injection is not approved by the FDA. So it is prescribed by pharmacists, or but and they are obviously qualified medical doctors. But the problem for me is that the FDA hasn't approved it. So that is a problem for me, and I don't know. You know what? I think the majority, you're looking at a big split in the Supreme Court. We have a right-wing, conservative Supreme Court, and I am not sure, and it's just my own personal opinion.
You think we have a right-wing, conservative Supreme Court?
Absolutely. I'm not sure that they're taking the punishment in a vacuum that it should be, as analyzed under the 8th Amendment, and not taking it away from the heinous crimes that these people have been found guilty of. And I think it's very important to separate those when looking at 8th Amendment analysis for cruel and unusual punishment.
Okay, then. The Supreme Court found that states can use independent commissions now to draw these congressional maps. This is something that I have a little bit too intimate familiarity with, perhaps, because my husband was served in a legislature, and I paid a lot of attention to how this redistricting happened, because you can literally be written out of your district, things like this. And so tell us what they found and why this matters, though, to the average voter, because I think that's where our show would care.
I think what's important here is we have to understand the history. Okay, so just to give a bit of a bit of history to this. This goes back to the 17th Amendment that was created over 100 years ago. And in Article 1, Section 3 of the 17th Amendment, what that amendment did was that it said that the state legislature has the power to draft how the boundaries for delegation of Congress people are drawn. So what that obviously creates is you get the people in the legislature, in the state legislature, when you have a partisan area, what they try and do is create a boundary around that to make that one delegation.
One of the advantages of being the majority party.
Absolutely.
But they decided to go ahead in this particular state, and the issue at hand, if I understand it correctly, is they decided to go ahead and hire this independent commission, which sounds so good, kind of like term limits sounds good to me. But the problem with an independent commission is then that they're not unelectable, if you will. So you run into corruption issues, perhaps, bribery issues, perhaps, And so what was the finding?
Well, I think what the finding was is actually based around the word legislature in the 17th Amendment. And what the majority held in this particular opinion was the fact that legislature means the actual vote of the people rather than the people that they chose to be their legislatures.
Right.
And I think that is where the big dispute is, and it's a very strong dissent with, you know, Justice Roberts, who is arguably the greatest legal mind in the country right now, using the word chumps in the dissent. And he's saying, no, there's no legal precedent for you to be able to do this. We should go to the old, you know, to the recognized way of the democracy in a republic, which is that you choose your delegates and they do your legislatures, and they're the ones that write whatever they feel you know, represent you. And that is what was ruled against, is that they're saying that these commissions are illegal because it speaks for the people directly.
I see. All right. And the Supreme Court dealt a big blow to the Environmental Protection Agency today. Tell us about that one.
Well, this was, in my mind, probably the most controversial opinion that came out of the Supreme Court. And another reason...
Today?
Yes.
Or at all?
Today, but I think it's very representative of the court right now. And, you know, we joked earlier about how I believe that this is a right-wing court, but what essentially they're doing is they're putting a monetary value to a life. So what happened was the Supreme Court is saying the regulations that was proposed, and actually the regulation that came from the Obama-backed government and the Environmental Protection Agency, they did not take the cost into consideration in creating this regulation, because the EPA itself agrees that in order to be compliant with the emissions law that they've created would cost $10 billion a year to be compliant. And the Supreme Court, in an opinion written by Justice Scalia, said, well, you know what, for the amount of good that brings, that the cost consideration should have certainly been brought into consideration. But the EPA provided data that showed that for every dollar that is spent on compliance with a regulation, $9 will be saved on healthcare. And they said that, you know, you would be saving 1,000 lives a year. You would be there will be 130,000 less cases of asthma. And 540,000 jobs that would have been lost due to illnesses due to emissions would now be created.
I'm so sorry, we're running short in this segment.
For sure.
But you give such great descriptors, and even if I don't agree with you, I do appreciate you coming on this show, Abbas. And up next, we're going to talk about certain states deciding not to issue marriage licenses after the decision legalizing gay marriage in all 50 states. And we'll be back with more America Trends right after this. Stay with us.